committee member.
Kid, you cannot tell your neighbor he is stealing ducks when you are stealing frogs.
As High Commissioner, I was wrong. As Charandas Prasad, I reacted naturally how any person would have.
I did not come here for that kind of abuse. I did not come here for that kind of abuse. If you're going to go down that road, I'll walk off.
But it's all okay once they're talking. If they were talking, I could not have been here today.
You got ADHD.
I got nothing. Calm down.
I think I've done enough in terms of taking our team out of trouble from losing.
Come on, Lou Taylor. That's good. I'm reading the script now, and the first person that comes to my mind to play a detective,
Yes,
but
okay,
an
it's good to-
erratic
Mikhail
detective
Rodriguez.
is Mikhail Rodriguez.
Why an African slap an Indian? Why a man and slap a woman? No, you deal with that. You deal with that.
We must encourage platforms like this because it brings together different people and allows for discussions to take place in our country on a multiplicity of fundamental issues.
Kingdom, you apologizing for something you think I did is wrong. I don't want you to do that, and you should not have done that. A pleasant Wednesday evening to you. Welcome to the Freddie Kissoon Show with co-host Leonard Craig. Our guest appeared twice or maybe 3 times the past 3 years on this program. We 1 month short 3 years, and we're glad to have him back after such a long break. And in that long break, he has transitioned or he has acquired a new status. Our guest this evening is GECOM Commissioner, which the whole of Guyana would have known him over the 2020 election, in which every day he and GECOM and his colleagues in the commission were in the news every day. Since then, SASE GUNRAJ has become a central committee member of the People's Progressive Party. That is the leading decision-making unit within the People's Progressive Party. So we'd like to welcome, after a long break, SASE GUNRAJ, and the protocols are necessary. Let me shake his hand. SASE?
Pleasure.
I think 99% of the people watching this program and seeing SASE GUNRAJ, one of the country's leading attorney plus his politics, would want to say, let's hear his thoughts on the subject that is ubiquitous in Guyana, the subject that is being talked about all over the place. The ADRIANNA Young tragedy. It had so many dimensions. And I'd like to ask SASE for his thoughts, whether brief or comprehensive, on that ongoing event.
Good evening, Freddie. Good evening, Leonard. Before I start, let me express the pleasure it is to be here. After a particularly long period, I don't know whether it's your default or mine, but suffice to say we are here. And suffice to say also that you have immediately put me into the hot seat. But that notwithstanding, most of my thoughts on this ADRIANNA Young issue are in the public domain. But before I delve further, it would be remiss of me not to publicly and to use your forum to express my deepest sympathy to her parents and the sorrowing relatives. It's a tragic loss. To lose anyone under any circumstances is difficult, and to lose someone under what are considered unnatural circumstances is particularly more difficult. From the outset, Freddie, in fact, very early in this imbroglio, perhaps day two or 3 at the latest, I stated publicly that the police had indeed lapsed, and I still hold that view, and I believe that initial lapse of the police has caused this tragedy to become what it has become. That notwithstanding, I believe that subsequent thereto, tangible steps have been taken to assuage that initial harm that was occasioned by that initial police lapse, and in the form of an independent forensic pathologist. In this instance, there wasn't one, there wasn't two, there were three pathologists. In addition to that, we heard the president only 2 days ago remarked that steps have been taken to have an independent investigator work on this case. And what I've read in today's papers is that investigator has already begun his work. What is quite unfortunate, though, is the ready willingness of people from some very unassuming people of a political nature, entities, etc., who have sought to capitalize on the unfortunate death of this young lady, this child, for their own gains. And I find that to be very, very distasteful. We see over the recent days, we see that some scams have been uncovered at the expense of this young lady. We see persons who have I've spoken publicly about the rantings of a nurse, an assistant nurse or whatever position she held, in a private conversation. To use the words of the streets, people try to big up themselves at the expense of this tragedy, and that I find to be distasteful and disgusting. What this incident, though, has revealed are several aspects of the administration of the police, etc., which can be improved. And it is my hope, and I'll say this publicly, I am confident from the level of the president coming right down, have taken cognizance of those issues. Some may be systemic, some may be cosmetic, but as I sit here confidently in the view that steps are being taken to address those issues.
Leonard?
Okay. I like to sometimes ask you personal questions that public information, not getting into your personal business, but the questions are personal. Where did you grow up? Where did you attend school?
I'm what they call, a tongue boy, like Freddie. I grew up in Central Georgetown. I attended school in Central Georgetown. And while it was many years ago, and I don't, and I wouldn't put it at the top of my resume, I attended Queen's College. And and I believe the reason you have asked that question is to perhaps try to decipher what kind of molding one might have received from an educational institution. But I believe, suffice to say that the kind of molding that institution provided speaks for itself.
Okay. Why law?
Why not? But the funny thing is, and this may be a very, I actually like that question and that the line that you're going with that. I didn't always want to become a lawyer. I did science in school. In fact, I went so far, my undergraduate studies, I hold a Bachelor of Science degree in biology. Medicine was my preferred route. But at some point in time, I lost that interest. And law there were some ongoing events that caused me to hearken towards the field of law, and I went in that direction, and suffice to say, I have no regrets. Some of my friends like to tell me, and of course, only persons close to you can make those kinds of jokes with you. Some people like to tell me I couldn't become a doctor. As a consequence, I settled for law. So I don't mind having settled for law.
Good. Why politics?
Generally, politics and law seem to be a very natural union. I don't want to say that union came naturally for me. My gravitation towards politics is grounded in my belief in service. Even in my practice daily, I have such an eclectic mix of clients, from fairly large clients, but importantly, if one were to sit in the waiting room at my office and observe the kind of clientele, or sitting with the confines of my office, I maintain a very decent portfolio of ordinary folk. And while that ordinary folk allows you to keep your feet firmly planted on the ground, keep your ears close to the ground as well, to get a feedback of what is happening in society, and it allows you to touch society in the most meaningful way. But that's on a one-to-one or individual basis. Politics allows you, in whatever shape, way, or form, to broaden that base. So a singular action, as in the case of my my practice and my area of endeavor, can touch one person or a family, or in the political sphere, a singular action can touch a community. It may touch an entire village. It may touch an entire demographic, and in many instances as well, it can touch nationally and internationally. And as a consequence, that I believe it's a metamorphosis of the area in which you serve.
Let me just preface this serious question with a light word. But you would not have been earning those hundreds of millions you do now if you were a doctor.
You're making a quantum leap here, Freddie. I wish I may have to ask the viewership to excise that from the record. But suffice to say, and to issue a disclaimer, I do not earn in that manner that you have. That you have.
Yes, GUNRAJ, I'm joking. The serious part of the question now. The Caribbean Police Conference, which is meeting now or just met, concluded, the president addressed it, and when he was coming out, he was asked about the Adrian Young thing, and he said, I have done what I've promised. We have done what we promised, meaning the government. We have made our commitments, we have promised, we have delivered. What more can he do?
I believe the president's desire, like that of most, if not all, right-thinking members of our society, is for some sort of closure, and not a closure that is a plaster for a sore, not a closure that is consolatory or placatory, a closure that says primarily to the parents of Adrianna Young, to say to the citizens of this country that these are the circumstances as closely as our investigation can decipher, that led to the untimely death of this young lady. These are the persons who may or may not have been responsible for the death, or there may not have been someone or person or persons responsible for death. And I believe such an outcome is what is desirable, because the family needs closure. This country needs closure. We have all become so invested. Look, I mean, the importance of this matter is as such that it is, well, I don't want to say it is taking up too much of our time, but it is so important that it is on the forefront of all of our minds, right? And frankly, I don't mind it being on the forefront of our minds if we can see if it can engender systemic change. For example, immediately after this incident and arising directly out of that, the police force has adopted a different protocol in relation to missing persons, particularly missing children. That is one outcome that has will no doubt, or should, redound to the benefit of all citizens of this country. I would like to see, and I am starting to see already, different protocols in how information is disseminated from the police force. And those are the kinds of outcomes. But what you have, Freddie, are some aspects of this incident has been overtaken. We have overtaken by people and overtaken by events. You see people every single day. Unfortunately, I spend too much more time on social media than I should. But you see every day, people are popping up various theories. People are popping up photographs. People are culling small snippets of videos, and some of them you don't know whether they are actual recordings. Some of them you don't know whether they are photoshopped. You see various experts popping out of all over, real or imagined, taking one bit of information outside of an entire basket of facts and extrapolating that to finality in the public eye. That doesn't benefit Adrianna Young, justice for Adrianna Young, or doesn't redound to the benefit of her memory. And that is something that we must remember. One of my public excuse me, COVID. I actually would address that in a second. That one of my public posts on this matter was, before you take any of these what may be considered radical steps, consider what it is doing in relation to bringing us closer to this vaunted justice for Adrianna Young that is now a hashtag in everything that we do. I mentioned yesterday before I go that previously, pre-COVID, one was free to cough anywhere they wanted to, as long as they observe the courtesy of covering their mouth and so on. Now, as long as you even cough from a dry throat, it's now very bad. COVID has done that for us.
Let's move to your role at GECOM, which is what you might be most known for in recent times. There are quite a number of things happening at GECOM, and I'd want to start with what the opposition is asking for with respect to biometrics. And if you can address just after that, what are your views on scrapping the current national register of registrants and start a new house-to-house process and things like that, because those are the two main things that are being asked for.
Leonard, the breadth of your question may allow me to sit here and wax lyrical until perhaps next week this time. But let me say this very quickly. I've been in that commission for just over 10 years. In those 10 years, we've had I went to GECOM just before the 2015 elections. Excuse me. So I've seen the 2015 elections, national, the 2020 elections, national. I've seen the 2016, 2018, and 2023 local government elections.
So that's 5.
That's 5 elections. And we're steering down the barrel of the 6th, that is to say the upcoming general regional elections. Now, the issue of biometrics is surrounded by a series of other issues, some of which you touched on. You'd recall in 2019, after the passage of the no confidence motion, after the incumbent chairman, that is to say Justice Patterson, his unlawful and illegal and unconstitutional appointment was challenged. When all of those matters were being determined in the courts, after he was deemed unlawful, his coup de grace to the commission and by extension this country was to sign an order to commence house-to-house registration. Excuse me. With the direct effect of what you just said, to scrap the list and to start over. That was challenged in court. The Chief Justice ruled that you could not remove persons unlawfully who were registered on the program, on the
NRR.
Excuse me. That ruling was never appealed. That ruling remains the law of this country. So, to do otherwise at this point would be in a flagrant violation of that ruling of the court. And that, I believe, was one of the pillars upon which the Honorable Madam Justice Claudette Singh, chairman of the commission, ruled when she voted against the biometrics. Excuse me. The other aspect is timing. Biometrics and the implementation of biometrics is not something that can be done overnight. It will take time to implement. It will require logistics. It will require procurement. It will require lots of factors to be put in place. The same people who are calling for biometrics now will complain that if elections are delayed on account of implementation of biometrics.
Let me interject a little. Vincent Alexander was on this program, and he said he knows that the time is not sufficient to have biometrics in time for 2025, but he wants the election to be postponed for about 2 years. How?
Leno, let me address that frontally. Vincent Alexander and the other associations with which he is connected, they will be the first ones they will be the first ones with placards and petitions to international organizations and to concerned bodies to complain that Guyana is in an undemocratic state for not holding elections. We don't have to go far for a precedent, you know. In my lifetime, in 1997, the regional general elections, the parliamentary parties agreed to the implementation of a voter identity card. They passed it. The bill was perhaps one of the few. I don't have the legislative record, but it was perhaps one of the few that received unanimous support in the parliament. Immediately upon them losing the elections, they found Esther Pereira and they filed a petition. The very judge who now sits as chairman of the commission, presiding in that elections petition case, and vitiated those elections. Right? Now, the duplicity is palpable. And you cannot. But importantly, and I believe this is the last thing I want to say on this issue, we have had the current list that we have. We went to the 2001 elections, the 2006 elections, the 2015 elections, the 2020 elections. I'm pointing out, or I'm singling out, the 2015 elections because we know what the result of those elections were. On the very list. This issue of the justification that is being proffered for biometrics is voter impersonation. We have not had a credible, and I'm saying this very deliberately, we have not had a credible case of voter impersonation made in this country. That feeble attempt in 2020 during the recount process to manufacture information in relation to persons being out of the jurisdiction and voting, persons being dead and voted. Freddie Kissoon was at Kaichor News then. Kaichor News ran a series of articles debunking that. People who they claimed were dead, were actually, are some people who I know, people who are still alive today and working in Ghana. They claim that the spouse of an attorney who was involved in the plethora of elections cases during those 5 months was out of the jurisdiction. People who you can touch and feel and verify their presence and that they were alive. Those claims were made. So as I said, at this point, the case for biometrics, excuse me, particularly delaying of an election for the purposes of implementing it, has not been made. And that is the position of the commissioner. We have moved on from there.
Based on what happened in 2020, one would like to think that every conceivable, and I repeat, every conceivable loophole that could give rise to question and suspicion will be closed by GECOM. This may very well be one of the most transparent elections in the history of the Caribbean, the one that's coming up.
Freddie, the 2020 elections was not less than transparent. In fact, the transparency of the process is what led to the discovery, disclosure, and the discovery, the disclosure, and the publicizing of the dastardly acts that Mingo tried to perpetuate on this nation. Subsequent thereto, there has been a slew of legislative changes, as the public is well aware of. These changes went to public consultation. Interested organizations and so on had an opportunity to send in their proposal. The parliament, it was extensively debated. And a lot of the processes, and I will agree with you, I didn't disagree just now when I said that 2020 was transparent. But I agree that 2025 beckons to be even more transparent. For example, never before, the manuals for polling day, the manuals for management officials, they are now publicized. I saw an article on Newsroom just a couple of days ago speaking about the commencement of training for polling day workers. And under the thread, under the comments under that article on Facebook, you had a long discussion back and forth about the publication of the manuals, etc. What I gleaned from that, all of the potential the trainees are emailed a copy. The manuals are now published on the GECOM website. Either of you, the public, can access that, download it, and look and see when I go into a polling station, this is what is supposed to happen. This is what is supposed to happen before. This is who could do what, and that's what happens with my ballot afterwards. This is what a returning officer is supposed to do. This is what a deputy returning officer can do. This is what a supernumerary returning officer can do. This is what their roles, this is what their responsibilities are. That is one area. Several that are pigeonholed there. Excuse me. There are so many other aspects. The world is watching, as it did in 2020, at what is happening with our processes. For example, let me give another example about transparency. The political parties have a say, albeit a consultative one, in relation to the placement of polling stations. In 2020, that was such a difficult task. It was like pulling teeth to have polling stations situated in areas that are convenient for all of the electors in that catchment area. That is now legislated. Those polling stations have to be shared and publicized in advance. Those are some of the issues that come off at the top of my head.
Another request that has been made by probably the opposition and others is to have cameras inside the polling station. It is being rumored that you and your colleagues who were elected by the PPP to sit on GECOM has disagreed with that. Confirm whether that rumor is so, and please discuss with us what are your objections to having cameras showing the entire process on polling day. I don't recall as I sit here whether that is a matter that has been discussed the finality at the commission. And what I'm about to do is to share my personal view on this issue. And that is what I'm about to do, my personal view on this issue. Cameras in polling stations sound like a very excellent idea in the vein of the transparency to which Freddie referred a moment ago. But
it is not by accident, and that I said earlier on when I prefaced my foray into GECOM and its activities by saying that I sat through 5 elections. It was a baptism by fire and a continuous confirmation by that fire and other fires. And when I mentioned earlier on about the 1997 elections petition, those were all done contextually. Cameras in polling stations can both be good and bad. Unfortunately, my view is that the bad outweighs the good. And this is what is going to happen. We are well aware. You two have been around longer than I have been. The terrain of Guyana, polling stations are not only in nice, cushy areas, you know. In the 2020 elections, we had 2,339 polling stations scattered all across this country. Those polling stations exist in some areas that have limited access to technology, that have limited or no access to polling station, to electricity. Excuse me. You have polling stations that exist in places that may not benefit from the plenitude of facilities that a polling station that you are contemplating has. And this is what is going to happen, I am sure, because my experience tells me this is going to happen.
I think I know where you're coming from.
You're gonna find that a request coming from some isolated polling station where an incident was alleged to have occurred, and a request is made for footage from that polling station. Mm-hmm. When no footage can be prepared,
it's maximized.
It's a problem.
Yeah.
But let me not limit it to the far-flung areas. It can happen under your eyes too. You can have 15 polling stations in a polling place, as happens. Christchurch, Redeemer, right up the road, St. Gabriel's has several polling stations in one place. 9 can be working, or 9 could be working. Something is deliberately done or happens to one, that exception now becomes the rule. That is my concern. That's my personal view. And that is my objection to cameras in polling stations.
Well, you said that is your experience after 5 elections. I haven't participated at the bureaucratic level at 5 elections, but I know what went on in 25 elections. So I could tell you that one incident in one area will be the challenge to vitiate the election.
Exactly.
Or a recording could be taken. You see what's happening with the ADRIANNA Young thing? A recording video could be taken from one of those polling stations, altered by AI to show some irregularity, and it spread like wildfire on social media, and the election was won. You know that is going to happen.
Before the advent...
Look at the Adrian Young tragedy.
Before the advent of social media, there was an old adage that says, a lie makes its way around the world before the truth can tie its laces. That has held so true and has now been exacerbated by the advent of social media.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that I am thinking of could happen is people will take an image and said, this person was just declared, Tom Jones was just declared, because they shout the person's name for everybody in the polling thing. And people are going to come and say, I know Tom Jones, that is not Tom Jones. I am seeing it on this video. Somebody has voted for Tom Jones. And it could very well be that several things could happen. It could be a different Tom Jones. It could be very well be Tom Jones, but because the technology to get to us got to come through the internet,
Leonard,
and the internet gets
Leonard,
blurry and all of that.
I am not denigrating your example or your hypothesis. I will tell you what I saw happen with my own eyes. And it's a well publicized incident that involves Amna Ali, God rest her soul,
in Annandale,
at the Monrepo primary
Monrepo.
school, and a video that was circulated.
Anil name calling.
Anil name calling. Earlier in the day at that polling station, at that polling place, which housed several polling stations, there were several classrooms contiguous to each other, and each one had a polling station. A gentleman turned up in the first one, and he had an exact name as someone who had to vote in a polling station a few doors down. He turned up, presented his name, they allowed him to vote. A few minutes or sometime later that day, morning, someone else with a similar name, with the exact name, turned up. And they said, hold on, you voted already. Police held on to him. And he was actually held in custody at the Better for Acting police station. It was brought to my attention. I actually visited that polling location. On the face of it, it appeared as though some mischief had occurred. When I sat with the GECOM officials, the deputy returning officers who were responsible for that area, when I sat with them and I deciphered, it turns out that this gentleman had to vote a couple of doors down. So you had a name ticked off, say John Jones, in room A, polling station A, and in polling station D, an unticked John Jones. So, and you know, once that complaint made its way up to the hierarchy of GECOM, that is to say, Lowenfield and Mingo, they realized what the issue was. The gentleman who was in custody was released and allowed to vote. Moments later, an identical incident occurred at another polling place. And because of the experience or the resolution of that first one, it was very easy to resolve the second one because the precedent was already there. Now, the fact of that matter, if taken out of context, if extrapolated, if publicized in an improper manner, can you imagine the kind of mayhem that will cause on election day that goes from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., 12 hours of polling that you prepare for more than 12 months in advance?
You live up the East Bank, right?
I do.
Mayhem broke out after the postmortem, and I think there was a huge mammoth backlog from Agricola going back because fire was on the road. Did you get caught in that?
I managed to pass before that happened.
Before it happened. Now,
yes.
As someone who witnessed the attempt 5 months to rig the election, and you sat here twice and said some people what they had to say were disappointing. You must have heard Aubrey Norton, the opposition leader, and Nigel, you said that what happened on that Monday all over Region 4, Region 5, Region 3 was the installation of agent provocateurs. You want to comment on either the validity or absurdity of that?
Freddie, I believe every single one of us act with as much deliberateness as we can in everything that we do. There may be some things that are involuntary, some things that we may not have the opportunity of thinking or deliberating upon prior to executing. But something like that, and let's take their hypothesis further. Something like that must have had to been thought of by the intellectual authors before its implementation. And any such analysis the first question must be asked, to whose benefit will this accrue? Now, I have said publicly, again, I've said it here earlier on, how when you're taking any of these steps, ask how does it improve the quest for justice for Adrianna Young. But I want to ask another question. To whose detriment did the introduction? I'm not as fluent in French as you are to pronounce the word agent provocateur, like you did. But to whose detriment did that accrue? They want to lay every problem and the source and everything at the feet of the government. And I want to ask it very simply. What does the government benefit from that? The same and the same roads that the government is building every single day to improve the lives of all of us. All of us have to drive on those roads. They're gonna put elements in place to damage those roads. The same people who they expect taxes from, they're gonna put people in place to affect them from earning, to put people in place to prevent that from happening. It makes no sense. And the way you said it, that I mentioned previously that I was disappointed in a statement of some people, statements made by certain people. My disappointment continues every day, unfortunately, every single day. And my grandmother used to say, if you got nothing good to say, it's better you shut your mouth. Right? There are so many things to constructively criticize. There are so many topical issues that you can make proper statements on, even if you are politicking or engaging in political grandstanding even. Don't be sensible in your utterances.
I cannot not ask you this question, and it has to do with Mr. De Silva. I think that's his name, right? The former
legal advisor
that
to says GUNRAJ fired.
Yes. Your name calling.
Says your name calling.
Take us through what occurred there and why
the man gave an opinion contrary to his employer.
Right, but he said that is not so, that GECOM knew of what he was going to court to say. And I think he threatened legal action, or he started legal action, I'm not sure.
You've asked and answered the question, both of you gentlemen. First of all, as jokingly and anecdotally as you said it, I want to make it clear, says GUNRAJ did not fire anyone. It's a collective decision of the Guyana Elections Commission. So let me make that clear. The second
you fired your legal colleague.
Well, in that vein, Freddie, and you know this better than many of us, and I don't want to raise that answer here. You're hired, you're liable to being fired. That's a reality we are all faced with. There are very few offices. There are very few offices in the world, but particularly in general, in particular this country, that have security of tenure guarantee. Incidentally, commissioners of GECOM are one of those offices that has security of tenure. That being said, and you did say, Leonard, that legal action was threatened. This is not a cop out, and you know I'm not prone to copping out, but most, if not all, of the issues have been in the public domain. I believe that this matter is heading in a legal direction. There has been a demand letter. I understand that there has been a response, and as a consequence, I don't want to give any further view on it. Suffice to say, generally, and this is all I'll say on this. Generally, and I'm taking off my commissioner hat and I'm wearing on my legal hat. You are bound by the instructions of your client. You are in court as counsel to carry out the instructions. When a client walks into your office and tells you, this is my issue, this is what I want, you know what is that is considered? That is considered that you are in legal jargon, you're taking instructions from your client. That is what is said. You're instructing counsel. As a consequence, counsel ought not to deviate from the instructions of their client.
I guess all eyes were on the PPP Congress and who would be elected. And there popped up, says GUNRAJ, elected to the Central Committee of the PPP. So you know now that political questions relating to your party will be put to you. Since I've known you a long time, and I could say this without, I don't have it in my DNA to flatter people, but I've known you, and I've known you to be a very decent man. And Priya Manik-Chan was here 3 years ago, and she did say, when you have governments, people misbehave, and you have to deal with them. Now that you're in the leadership of the PPP, I would think that you will uphold the dignity of your party and your government in case there's anyone in the midst that misbehave.
Well, of course, Freddie. I believe a fact of our mere existence in this world as mortals is framed under that system of punishment or penalty for wrongdoing. And the PPP as an organization is no different. Of course, the reference you made to Minister Manik-Chan was one more concerned with government. Government has mechanisms for penalties in the event of wrongdoing, and the party has penalties in the event of wrongdoing. And I have no difficulty, and as my party doesn't either, and we have seen even from the government penalties being meted out for wrongdoing, even in face of criticism from all over the place.
Who or what introduced you to the PPP? How you come to choose the PPP? To the extent that you've now risen to the highest decision.
His father and his grandfather.
That is not true, Freddie. In fact, I often say that if my father, I often wonder, I lost my dad at a young age, I often wonder what his thoughts would be on my involvement in active politics. But I was introduced to politics by Bibi Shadi. Once more, God rest her soul. I knew Bibi for a very, very long time from when I was
She
very
was once
young.
a minister.
Bibi and I shared chambers after she became a minister. And it was at that point that she introduced me. And I became a member of the PPP. I've been a member of the PPP for, I think it's almost 20 years now.
Since I've known you for a long time, I am trying to imagine when the election campaign starts. I'm trying to imagine what you will be like on the platform. Have you thought about your first speech? What you would say? It got to be. Would it be ladies and gentlemen, good evening, or would it be comrades, good evening?
Which one it will be? I could tell you two things. I could tell you two things, Freddie. One that you didn't know, and another which may also come as a surprise to you. Because of my presence at GECOM, I don't believe that I can actively campaign in a manner that you just spoke about.
Okay.
However, of course, being a commissioner, it prevents me from being on a list of candidates or any such thing.
Okay, I didn't know.
However, what you don't know, in the 2011 elections, I actually was on a list of candidates.
Okay.
And I actively campaigned.
You were on the pulpit?
I was on that pulpit that you're speaking about. And if I must say so myself, it is actually reminding me of a very exciting time. As you know, you've been around many elections. Actively, I've actually seen you on a pulpit myself. It's a very adrenaline-laced arena. So whether you decide to say, ladies and gentlemen, or comrades, sometimes isn't a predetermined decision, but it's something that may be influenced by what you see when you are walking up on that platform. And I don't know if time will permit it. You can tell me.
You got 4 minutes more.
Let me see if I can put this in 1 minute. In those same elections in 2011, I campaigned for the majority on the West Demerara. And a cousin of mine, who's a professional, accompanied me to one evening. And we went to a place just in the vicinity of where that new shore base is at Reed and Hoop, in Bestowell Road. And it was a small gathering, it was early evening and so on. And a lot of the people were listening from like their windows and so on. It's a smaller community. And I stood at a podium on the back of a paddy trailer and I spoke. My cousin who accompanied me was was nearby and he listened. When we got into the car, he said to me, "This is what you just come and waste your time to do." But we were driving to another meeting later that evening, and it was in one of the canals polder. And after a while, you couldn't drive because of how much crowd there was. So we parked and we walked together, wending our way through. The meeting had already started, and I found my way onto the podium and I spoke. Of course, there were thousands of people at that second meeting. And when we were leaving that second meeting, I asked him, I said, "What do you have to say now?" He said, "I have nothing to say." And him having nothing to say, I think, is a perfect example of what it was. What you would say, it's not a matter, it's actually a matter of tailoring what you say to whom you are speaking. We do that every single day. What I will say to you here may be different from what I will say to the gentleman I'm saying when I'm passing out the door. But it is,
Leonard, you got 1 minute.
Yeah. Just if there's any thing incidental to what we've discussed.
Yeah, it looks so.
To what we've discussed today that you wish to just touch on, just to end this, or any other thing that you had on your mind you want to just
I think you've given me a
talk to the public.
There isn't anything particularly, Leonard, but in terms of topical issues, I did say that whatever I have to say, I have a social media platform that I try to utilize responsibly, and I advocate for responsible use of social media. But if it has to say anything, it's something that is close to both of you, because I see you speaking a bit time, is care and caution on the roads. I posted a statistic this morning that there were 12 deaths over the last 12 days by motorcycle motorcycle riders or pillion riders. Right? You see people, and in my post, I asked that people value their own lives before they look for others to value and respect their lives.
Since we've got to go, the operator whispered my ears. We're into an election, so GECOM is going to be in the hot seat. We look forward for you coming here and explaining the dimensions that surround the GECOM's meetings and the controversy.
I remain available to your program, Freddie, and I want to give a pinky swear promise that the next hiatus will not be as long as this one.
Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Welcome.
Thanks for being with us. We will see you on Friday at our call-in program. Our guest was GECOM Commissioner, Attorney at Law, and Central Committee member of the PPP, SASE GUNRAJ. Thanks for being with us. On behalf of our guest, SASE GUNRAJ, and our co-host, Leonard Craig, we'll see you later. Bye-bye.